Morning people, Nissan just announced a £2 billion investment in new car and battery factories in the UK, which Rishi Sunak is calling a huge vote of confidence in our automotive industry. And Brexiteers are cheering this as if it proves that Remainers were wrong. So my question is, when it comes to Brexit, aren't you tired of this government pissing on you and telling you it's champagne? I mean, you can even see from Rishi Sunak's own words that he's lying to us. In his celebratory tweets, he says, "This Nissan commitment will protect Britain's largest car factory, supporting 7,000 jobs and 30,000 employed in the wider supply chain." Protect them from what, Rishi? You say that the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has shown that we're backing the industry with $2 billion for the automotive sector from 2025. But why? You're capitalists, right? Your whole thing is that the market should decide if a business lives or dies. If a business isn't competitive, it should die then, surely. So why are you giving Nissan £200 million? Oh, and that's on top of the $80 million they already gave Nissan after Brexit as a bribe to get them to stay here. Could it be because Nissan warned again and again and again and again that a Brexit that created trade barriers with the EU, where 80% of the cars that they make here are sold, would mean it would no longer make sense for them to keep their factory here? And so you're now having to pay them the cost of Brexit so they don't go. Is that what you mean by protecting British jobs? You see, when we were in the EU, there were no tariffs, border charges on the stuff that we sold between the EU and the UK. But most importantly, we had the same rules and regulations as the EU because we made those rules and regulations together in Brussels. So there was no need to check products that crossed the border because anything that's legal in the UK was legal in the EU too. Which makes trading a lot cheaper, which is why people like me went to Sunderland to warn people about what Brexit might do. It would make no sense for them to keep the factory here if it's in a different jurisdiction to where most of the cars end up going. That's why they're likely to, over the next 10 years, reproduce that factory on the other side of the channel. Now, it's important to look at the kind of Brexit that we actually got compared to the one that the Brexiteers said they were going for. For starters, right now, there are no tariffs yet, but we'll get to that. But that's not what they said they wanted, because Rishi Sunak made this man our Prime Minister.
I think it's a great shame that we've missed the opportunity to come out at no deal.
And a no deal Brexit would have meant tariffs on every single car we sold to the EU, which is why the Nissan boss said,
if the tariffs are imposed, it's not a question of Sunderland. Our whole business in UK or in Europe will not be sustainable because 70% of our production is exported out of Sunderland.
And most of the car industry was saying the exact same thing. But in 2019, MPs banded together and made it illegal for Boris Johnson to go for no-deal Brexit. Remainers did that. We saved the UK car industry. And as for keeping the rules the same to protect EU-UK trade, the deal that Boris Johnson signed included a level playing field on things like competition rules and environmental protection to prevent the UK undercutting the EU economy. So it's a much more restrictive deal than the taking back control the Brexiteers told us they were going for, which is why even Boris Johnson called his own Brexit deal unfair, and Brexiteers simply say it's not the Brexit they voted for. And even in the areas of law that we can diverge from the EU on, many Tories are complaining that we're not doing that. The only explanation for that is that the Tories who are in charge are well aware that doing that would only create even more trade barriers, making trade even more expensive than Brexit has already made it. So right now, my notifications are filled with Brexiteers telling me that Remainers like me were wrong for saying that Brexit would destroy the UK car industry, even though we stopped them from giving us a Brexit that definitely would have done. An analogy would be, imagine if you were fighting, like physically fighting, with an arsonist who was trying to burn down your house, and this goes on for years. Meanwhile, he's shouting and screaming, saying, "No, this wouldn't burn down your house," even though it obviously would. But during that time, you managed to fireproof the support structure, so at least the frame is safe. And afterwards, when most of the house is in ashes, they then say, see? Fire doesn't destroy houses. These people are economic terrorists. Because let's be clear, Brexit has damaged the UK car industry. The Tories even know it. Because right now, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory Secretary for Trade, is bragging about how this new Nissan project is some vote of confidence in the UK car industry, which she knows that her supporters will interpret as, see, Brexit wasn't that bad, even though this was her a few months ago.
Brexit was more traumatic, I think, for this sector than many others.
The UK car industry has been pointing out that Brexit is making their businesses more expensive for literally years at this point. So now the government is effectively paying car companies for those increases in cost. Which is weird because I can think of somebody 5 years ago, way back in 2018, who said something along the lines of, investment requires decent returns. Well, if you pour water into a bucket with holes in it, the bucket doesn't fill fast. Brexit makes any economy we have less productive. Also, you're talking about increasing our rate of national debt compared to if we didn't do Brexit. And given that our national debt isn't in a great place, right now doesn't seem like the best time for the government to be spending billions of pounds plugging the holes in a bucket that they punctured. Especially during a cost of living crisis, which reminds me of a conversation that I had with Grace Blakely from the pro-Brexit Corbyn wing of the Labour Party back in 2019, specifically about the damage that Brexit would do to Nissan.
And even if we did have, high tariffs on, for example, the auto industry, there are a load of other incentives and kind of mechanisms that we could use to support the auto industry. We could think about much more state intervention, much more kind of worker ownership in these things.
The forecasts do suggest that the economy will be hit if we have a no-deal exit, Grace, and that the hit will be taken by the poorest.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that Femi keeps coming back to this point of if we did this, it would be bad for business, as though all the decisions that we make need to be determined by basically what is in the interests of private investors.
And their workers.
At no point did I mention CEOs. I don't care about CEOs. I started by mentioning the 35,000 people in the Northeast who depend on that business to put food on the tables for their families. Those are the people who would be hit the worst, because anytime you take an economic hit, it's always the people at the bottom that suffer the most, and that is what I'm seeking to avoid.
And now here we are, with a Brexit that isn't even as bad as the kind of no-deal Brexit that Grace was defending, and yet it's taken an average of about £1,000 from every household in the country, made food at least 6% more expensive, on top of everything else our economy is going through, added up all together, leading to the sharpest fall in living standards ever recorded. Worse still, Grace suggested that government investment could be used to help businesses cope with Brexit, while accusing me of only caring about investor profits. Well, this is what that looks like. The United Nations recently said the government's failure to financially help the poorest people in the country might be breaking international law, because instead, they're spending billions of pounds in public money to top up the profits of a multinational corporation while people in the UK are struggling to feed their kids. Yeah, I know. You thought I was just going to go for the Brexiteers and the Tory side, but no. Everybody's catching these hands today. Because this shit is ruining people's lives, and the Brexiteers are still acting like they're the good guys, even though it's only getting worse. Several major car companies have said they simply will not survive the next phase of Brexit when tariffs kick in January. I'll link to a video explaining that below. This coming January is also the date that we start doing Brexit import checks, which the government has delayed 5 times because by their own admission, it would send prices through the roof, especially food.
Well, some costs, it would be quite significant. That if you look at small deliveries of things like cheese, you were talking about 71% increase maximum level on the retail price. And frankly, at that level, goods just wouldn't have come in.
And yet they're celebrating that inflation has come down. Not that prices have come down, inflation has come down, i.e. the rate at which prices have been going up, because those prices are still going up. The only reason inflation is coming down is because they're refusing to complete Brexit in full. Do you get how insane that is? They are publicly patting themselves on the back for refusing to do the one thing they got elected to do. Like I said, they are pissing on us and telling us that it's champagne. I'm Femi, this has been F Politics, so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.
I think it's a great shame that we've missed the opportunity to come out at no deal.
Brexit was more traumatic, I think, for this sector than many others.